Welcome to the Intuitive Rising podcast. I'm your host, Amy Brooks. Up until about 5 years ago, I was your average mom of three. It was after the sudden loss of my father that my life changed forever and the rising within me began. Since then, I've embraced my gifts and have stepped into my role as an evidential psychic medium, past life reader, higher self mentor, holy fire Reiki practitioner, and published author. In this podcast, we will talk all things spiritual and healing through a very grounded and relatable approach. I hope you'll continue to join me each week, remembering who you always were as we rise together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Intuitive Rising podcast. I'm your host, Amy Brooks. So excited for you to listen to today's episode. I had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Krystle McKenna. Krystle is a intuitive healer. She does Shamanic Journeying, and she tells us all about that. We definitely talk about more than just shamanism tonight. That was initially our intention, was to talk all about shamanism. We do talk about it, and she really, she relays that in a way that is easy to understand. And I definitely, learned some things today, had some aha moments, how to discern between what a shaman is versus someone who is a shaman practitioner. But yeah, overall, absolutely lovely lady, lovely person, lovely human. And she has the most infectious energy. I just felt very high vibe in her company, and I felt like I kept wanting to laugh, and it just felt like a really good time. It felt like a really good time. We also talk about what it means to be a reflector in human design, as Krystle is a reflector. A reflector is like 1% of the population, so not very common at all, and she talks about that. We talk about spirit guides. We talk about her spirit guides, how she really got in touch with her spirit guides, and I also share a little bit about how I got in touch with mine. And then we talk a bit about some of the differences between, shamanic practices and psychic readings, psychic abilities and mediumship abilities. And she had some questions for me about, my process and my rituals and routines and how I kind of get into that energy. So we talk about, we compare and we contrast those things. We talk about how they're similar and how they're different. Overall, very, very entertaining and enjoying conversation. If I do say so myself, I think it makes for very easy listening. And as well, there's some amazing little wisdom nuggets in there. So enjoy, risers. Hello, Krystle.
Hello.
I don't know, like, this is the first time we're connecting ever. Like, we've talked on Instagram, but this is the first time we're like talking voice to voice, although we've sent each other voice notes, I think, maybe once or twice. But it's the first time we're being like kind of in each other's company. And I don't know, as soon as I connected with you, I was feeling a little bit like, when you're having like kind of a rush night and like nothing's going right. And I was kind of like, oh my God, I'm all frazzled. And then I sat down and I don't know, your energy is very joyful. As soon as I'm connecting with you, like, I've done a lot of laughing since I've sat down, and it feels like easy conversation. So I think that this is a good match and a good indication of a good conversation to come.
Excellent.
Yes.
Sounds wonderful.
So your name is Krystle McKenna.
Yep.
And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about you in general, what it is that you do in terms of, intuitive, spiritual development work, like what floats your boat, what are you interested in? I feel like you're a jack of all trades, which I know is a loaded question, but I just want you to feel comfortable with sharing with the audience who may be unfamiliar, you might be a new person, a little bit about you. Like, who are you? Where are you in the world?
So I consider myself an intuitive energy healer.
Okay.
And kind of, what that entails is a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
I utilize my intuition, spirit guides, shamanic practices, a lot of different things to help people heal things that I have gone through in my life, basically, is my goal. I really would like to help women get through different types of emotional or mental or soul trauma, specific with things like grief, anxiety, burnout, like all of these things that you would normally have in a normal contemporary life,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of starting out with my
Mm-hmm.
business, and I plan on hosting group programs for women where
Mm-hmm.
they can learn techniques and learn about their intuition in order to provide healing for themselves in
Right.
those methods. Because I can't always be with you to provide healing. And I mean, I provide private sessions, but it is so empowering to be able to have tools to fall back on to heal yourself in those
Mm-hmm.
moments.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I'm getting shivers just talking about it. I have found so much peace and acceptance in my life, and kind of veering away from those really high expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and that overwhelm. And I really want other people to figure that out and find that for themselves.
Yes.
So I would say I'm most passionate probably about the group connection, because I think getting a group of women together is so powerful. It can be so powerful, and it can be so expansive.
Mm-hmm.
And I really would love other women to find a soul tribe or a coven or like a group of women where they can interact with each other in this spiritual manner and just
Mm-hmm.
empower and lift each other up.
That's
So,
so important. I think that we're all lacking that so much.
oh,
We've
so
never
much.
been like as busy as we are, as
Mm,
women, like collective, like, well, not just women, people, but yeah, women, and all the things, the home life and the kids, if we have choose to have children, all of that is just so much. And like
I
wearing a
know.
thousand different hats.
Exactly. And I think in the past, they talk about, lean on your village, but women now don't have a village, right?
Yeah. And I feel like there's, a lot of us feel unsafe with each other. Like as you were speaking, what I was thinking about is like healing the sister wound, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like just kind of all that competitive, like energy that can come when it's a bunch of women at times, and
Yes.
just how healing it is to be safe in like and held in that space where you don't feel that with other women, and how much we need that, like we need that, like just
It's
talking
so
about
true.
that makes me feel emotional. I know you got goosebumps, right? It's just like
Mm-hmm.
it's so powerful. I agree.
It really is. Like
Hmm.
my who I call my soul sisters,
Yeah.
finding them was like finding home.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we all want. I think we're all searching for that belonging.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we can find that with our soul tribe, but we can also, I feel like it starts with us too, and just becoming aware of what we need, to heal those. Yeah, heal those things. I made a note as you were speaking. I was kind of like, as you were talking about empowering others with healing, and I was thinking like of all the interviews that of all the people that I've had come on this podcast so far. There's a commonality among every single one, which is really empowering. Like they've all been healers, but
Hmm.
wanting to empower others to help heal themselves. And I
Yeah.
love that. And I feel like that's so important, because I know, like, in kind of like the old spiritual circles, things could be thought of as like a hierarchy, or, like you must come to me because I'm the special oracle. And I feel like that is not the way of the energy healers and workers that are kind of coming up right now. It's not our jam at all. Like we just want
No.
to all be equal and connect and belong and
Yeah.
help.
It's
Yeah.
funny that you say that. So, I mean, in my life, I've actually like dipped my toes in a lot of spiritual practices. Like I've
Yeah.
tried Wicca, I've tried Buddhism, I've gone to different
Hmm.
like Christianity churches, that kind of thing. And all of them did feel top heavy. It felt like you needed to be special in order to
Yes.
do those things. And there was no real community that came out of them, in my opinion. So when I
Yeah.
found my mentor, who I did a specific like shamanic training with,
Hmm.
and the group of women that was part of that group, it was a breath of fresh air.
I love that. So it's safe to say you're a seeker too. Like if you're
Oh,
kind of like dabbling and dipping your toes in all these different things.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. I'm noticing your bookcase and like all the books and other cards over there. Are those all books?
Those are all books, but I do have a
Oh,
very large
a
collection
large
of tarot.
collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to go and like look in your bookcase. I have this dream of one day kind of having a space and having kind of like a library, right? Like where it's like take out this book or borrow these cards. And I just think it would be so cool to like put all our resources together and share them.
That would be
That would
awesome.
be a dream. That would be a dream. And my wallet would like that because I am the worst for like buying books all constantly. My husband's like, why are you buying books at 3 in the morning? I'm like, oh, I couldn't sleep. Like, I don't know. He's like, that's my thing. Like, I don't do anything else. I'm pretty good. You know, I don't have any dirty habits, but books and tarot and oracle decks.
Tarot and oracle cards. I can't help myself.
I know, they're just so good. I just pre-ordered one the other day. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll remember it later. But it's a new tarot deck. I only have a couple of those because I have to really be drawn to tarot, like a certain deck. Whereas, like, you're the same way. Whereas I feel like, yes, the same to oracle decks, but I feel like I like more oracle decks than I like the tarot decks that I've come into contact with. But I'm also excited because I just pre-ordered Shawn Leonard's new oracle deck that's coming out.
I'm really excited. I haven't listened to that podcast yet, but I'm going to.
Yeah. I was kind of like I'm a talker too, but in that interview, I talk a little, but for the most part, I'm just like, I was like, I don't even know what's happening right now. It was funny because I talked to him before, like, well, in DMs and things, because we come from the same place. Like, it's strange. Yeah. And like have people that we know in common. And anyways, it's just like, I was fangirling totally, but yeah. I don't know where that was going. Oh, about his oracle deck. I pre-ordered it. It comes out in October and I'm super excited to get it. That's not what we're here to talk about though. No. But people love to hear, I think people like to hear conversations.
It's true. It is true.
Stuff. I mean, this is what talk shows are about, right?
More comfortable too.
I know, it's a good warm up rather than like, what is this in your definition? Like, that's not my style at all. But we are here today. We're here to talk about what you do and introduce the Intuitive Rising community to you. But also, we chatted. The reason that we kind of agreed to come together, decided to come together and do this talk, was because we were sharing about, I think you sent me a DM, you were like asking a question about something, like, I think it was
with regards to mediumship. Yeah.
Right. Something that you had experienced. Do you remember, like, do you want to share anything about that? I can't remember the details.
I think it was, I had a dream, and I don't dream generally. I don't have like lucid dreams in general. And I had a dream where a spirit came to me and asked me to bring a message to his son. And I didn't know who his son was, and he didn't really explain who his son was. And I was like, what do I do with it? Do I need to find this person, or, you know what I mean? And I think that kind of like bridged into the topic of like the difference between like shamanic practices and like interacting with the spirit world in shamanic practices versus mediumship. And if there's like differences, or if it kind of comes from the same avenue, because what I found in my research is anthropologically speaking, there are shamanic cultures all over the world, like that have started, centuries ago up until now, who have never been interactive in any type of way, but have the same characteristics, like same shamanic practices and stuff that have developed. So there has to be some kind of commonality there. And I think I'm most like there's most likely a commonality to a lot of other spiritual practices too, I believe.
So yeah, I think so for sure. And like, I know that off camera or off mic, we were talking about, I was sharing a podcast that I recorded this morning with a dragon channel. And we also talked in that about how it's so interesting because even though she's channeling dragons and I'm channeling like spirit guides or archangels or someone's past like loved ones, that it feels like there's some sort of like we're coming from the same place in some way. So we kind of discussed that too. So yeah, I feel like there's some sort of oneness, because the more I'm a seeker too, and I love to read. So the more I read about history and about, different religions and things like that, because by the way, I was never someone who was interested in anything religious. I'm taking note of the 1212 that I just saw on my screen, because
Nice.
in this podcast, the numbers always speak to us. So anytime I like glance down, it always is one of those numbers. It's very weird. But I was like never into any of that. I wanted to be, but
Yes.
there was something in it that felt like,
Wrong.
yeah, like what I was yearning for, that oneness and that belonging, I didn't get. So I would like keep
Yes.
attempting to go, and actually like sitting in, say, like a choir or a service, like I would often get emotional, especially during music, because you can feel the collective oneness in that. But I never really got what I wanted to. And then when I kind of awakened and stepped into my own spiritual journey, I was super interested in religion. So now I want to know everything. I'm like, I think I'm going to go back to school and take a degree in religious studies. Like it's weird. I am so interested, because what I'm finding is the more I learn, the more it's similar, and it comes from like this
Together.
one. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
branches, like a seed, and then they kind of all just grow and branch off differently.
It's funny that
Do
you
you
say
agree?
that. Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay.
So in my belief, I believe that source, spirit, God, whatever you want to call it, is in everything. It's in us, it's in the trees. I have a very animistic belief about source or spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And in my own practice, in my own spiritual practice, I actually visualize manipulating energy through something that I call mycelium.
Okay.
So I actually see branches of mycelium actually going out to different people, and I can interact with those branches in specific ways. I can actually, like, if a branch seems like it's dying, or if it seems like dull and it needs to be kind of revived, I can like strum it and bring the energy back into that line to provide healing to someone.
Wow.
And yeah, and I see myself in a lot of my visualizations as this, like, my body is the like trunk of a tree, and then everything coming off me is these mycelium, and I'm attached to everything in the world.
Okay, so it probably wasn't a coincidence that I brought through the image of a tree, because that's
No.
what was coming through in my own awareness. I'm like, why am I seeing a tree? Okay, I'll use this.
Totally.
It's all connected. It's crazy. When you get two intuitives together, it's like back and forth energy. I love that you do that. So is that something that you would do like during like a healing, like with someone, like intentional?
Yeah, it could. It depends. So it kind of actually goes into the shamanic practices in some ways.
Yeah.
So maybe I should kind of get into like how I got into shamanic practices. So
Yes.
I worked with this mentor named Dee Monty, who actually, she's so wonderful. She's now like my dear friend and also my mentor. But she had this course called Discovering the Healer Within. And what it was is, in her spiritual journey, she actually went and learned shamanic practices under a Peruvian shaman, like in Peru.
Mm-hmm.
And she brought that back into her own practice. But Dee is a very like loosey-goosey type of person, and she doesn't really like to be inside a box. And she feels that intuition is really about just asking the universe and the universe providing. So in this training, she kind of gave us the concepts of shamanic practices, and she kind of sort of gave us an idea of what they were, but she actually wanted us to basically take these concepts and play with them intuitively to develop our own way of providing that practice. So for example, with the what that tree or the mycelium that I just talked to you about, one of the like lessons that we had with Dee was about cord cutting and also soul retrieval. And my version of that was, I can see these cords that may have like died or got separated from somebody that may be a part of their soul or energy that they need.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally utilize my energy to strum them back to life. Other people might actually see like pieces of a person that they actually have to take and then sew back into someone.
Right.
Like there's a lot of different visualizations that can happen to do a soul retrieval, but that is how I interpreted that particular shamanic practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful to empower you to like work with that and figure that out for yourself. Because I feel like, you know, the way that spirit might work and speak with me might be totally different than from you, right? So I think it's really important. It's one of those things that need to be kind of practiced and worked with yourself.
Exactly.
So I love that Dee is a person that would, you know, a guide, a mentor that would allow that. So I don't know if you see that all the time. I personally I haven't taken any sort of mentorship, but I have heard from other people it's kind of like more structured. So it sounds like not.
Her mantra is the no plan.
That's like what I'm like. That's the kind of mentor I would be too. I'm just like, let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens, basically. She'll have like sometimes she'll have a general idea of what she wants to work with, but she lets spirit totally guide her.
I think that's how it should be.
Yeah.
I really do. I know
that's how I interact with my clients as well. It's totally intuitive. We go into a session and I'm like, okay, what needs to be happening here? And I ask spirit, basically.
So you just show up and you just see what happens.
Yep.
Yeah. I love that. I've stepped into that as well with my work. I was sharing in that interview we talked about with Shawn Leonard the other day. I was asking him about his, like if he does rituals and things beforehand. And, you know, he was talking about meditation and kind of setting intentions as I do as well. But then we got into the topic of oracle cards. And he was saying, you know, like at the beginning, he might like always rely on oracle cards in a reading to like start the reading, to bring up the messages and then do it. And I laughed because I said, that's what I was kind of getting to. And I was asking you about if you used to do rituals and you don't so much anymore. Because when I say I don't do rituals beforehand anymore, I don't mean that I don't set my intention or I don't meditate. I mean, I used to, in the early days, come down here like 30 minutes before a client session, pull cards, write down the descriptions, all the keynotes, and then I go, okay, spirit, I'm ready. And then I would take notes of like specific loved ones. I'd ask them to come in earlier so that I was already kind of like, I already built the power really and was in it and had that flow of communication from their loved one before I hit join. So then I was just like immediately ready to go. And that was because of a lack of confidence in like, can I sit down? And can I not rely on any of that and have that all happen for me? And it happened in time. But I love to hear you say, you know, you sit down, you probably have some rituals and practices, but you're like, okay. And there's a confidence in that, you know, to sit down and go, okay, I trust spirit's going to come. And I trust what is going to come in is going to be what's right. I think that's the thing. Like people always want like a step-by-step, like, give me the step-by-step. And they're like probably like, God damn it, Amy, when I'm like, trust your intuition and practice with it. Like that's all. Like you have to be willing to maybe possibly make a mistake. You have to just do it.
Yes.
It's like something that comes as you do it. Right?
Well, and the thing is too, is it a mistake or was it meant to be?
You're very aligned with me because I always reframe the failure with my clients because my spirit guides have done that for me. When they're like, Amy, there's no such thing as a failure to your soul. It's all trial and error. Maybe it was a failure that you stayed with that job for the rest of your life instead of leaving it, you know, like, or, you know, you don't know. Like maybe that was a success because that's what you needed to take from that experience.
Exactly.
Right.
You're learning something in everything. And every healing that I do, I'm healing myself too, right?
100%. Yeah. 1,000%. And I'll notice that. I don't know if I think you do because you talked at the beginning, like kind of that your intention when you're working with people is to kind of help them with things that you've gone through.
Yes.
Right.
Because I've healed that already for myself.
Right. Yeah. Because what I was going to add, where I was going there in my mind was, do you notice themes with like clients or certain issues that come up? But obviously you probably do, because that's your intention. Because
Yeah.
I don't have that specific intention. I haven't like consciously said it. My intention is always to connect to people that are aligned, that are going to be able to receive the information, and it's going to impact them. Because my thing is like, I want a ripple effect. I want a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Like that's my goal. Which I kind of was seeing in my mind's eye when you were talking about your branches. And I was like, there's your ripple effect, you know, like all the people that
Yeah.
you're reaching and touching. But yeah, I very aligned, very aligned. I love all of this. So can you tell us briefly for others and for myself, because I know what a shaman is kind of, but I
Mhm.
don't really know, like it's very kind of base
Mhm.
level
Yes.
understanding.
So actually, a shaman is actually a very, like the term shaman is actually something that's very, um, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like
A
culture,
normal person wouldn't call themselves a shaman, okay?
right? Yeah,
In shamanism, because
right,
it is a vocation that is selected by spirit or by the
right.
community that they're in. So
Okay,
I would never ever call myself a shaman, because that is not something that you actually name yourself. It is
right,
actually something that is put on you.
right.
Um, Now there, and a shaman is more in traditional shamanism than kind of neo shamanism. And neo
Mm-hmm,
shamanism is kind of like new age shamanism, where they've taken
mm-hmm,
specific aspects of traditional shamanism and then they kind of
mm-hmm,
adapt it, right?
mm-hmm.
So whenever I talk about shamanic practices, a lot of the information that I've received. Now I'm not an expert. A lot of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff I've like looked
Mm-hmm.
up on the internet and kind of
That's
researched,
okay. Yeah.
or I've like gotten the information from my mentor.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm talking about shamanism in general, it's that traditional indigenous shamanistic traditions that have
Mm-hmm.
come up through generations. So
Mm-hmm.
someone who is a shamanic practitioner is somebody who has adopted the shamanism as their way of life, but
Okay.
they would never really consider themselves as a shaman, because a shaman is a vocation in a tribe.
So, a shamanic practitioner would be somebody who would work with shamanic principles, but
Yes.
not be a shaman.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think I would say that a shamanic practitioner too, they a shamanic practitioner will utilize techniques of
Yeah.
shamanism and techniques that a shaman would utilize, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of rigid. Like it's in a box, like
Yeah.
specific rituals, getting into trance states in a specific way, which is part of the reason why I don't call myself a shamanic practitioner, because I'm not in the box at all.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Got it. It's reminding me of a book that I ordered and I read a little bit of, but haven't kept with it. It's called this. You know how I talked about off camera the secret history of the world, or maybe I did talk about
Mm.
it when we were recording. But I ordered another one called the Secret History of the Spirit World.
Oh.
It's written by a different author and it's a little bit more dry, so I'm finding it
Mm.
like a little difficult to get in. But the whole first chapter was all about shamanic um, practices.
Oh,
So yeah,
really?
as you were talking, I was like, huh, yeah, just talking about the history of that and like how
Hmm.
what you said, like all these different cultures from all these different places that never would have interacted but have the same kind of,
Yeah.
you know, like yeah, like there's a little bit of talk about that in the book. So I thought that was really cool. So thank you for discerning that for me, because that's something that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Do you know anything like say the term like medicine woman or medicine man?
Mm.
Is that
So
connected to your knowledge to like
it can be. So
okay,
so different cultures call a shaman different names. So a medicine
right.
man or a medicine woman can be like a shaman. Shaman
Yes.
is actually a term from the, I think it's a Tunistic
Mhm.
language, which is from Siberia, and it basically
That's in the book.
means the one who knows. So
Yes.
the distinction is that not every medicine man, woman, or different type of spiritual healer will be a
Mhm.
shaman.
Right.
The distinction is that one, a shaman is selected by their community or they're
Right.
selected by the spirit world, and two is that a shaman, I actually have this written down here somewhere. They actually, they can enter a trance-like state in order to provide healing, to interact with the spirit world and spirits in the spirit world, to provide guidance to their community. But not only that, whenever they go into this altered state, they can actually interact with it at will. So they can come in and out of it at will. And also they can interact with it at will. So the way that I kind of envision that is, say just a normal person goes into a dream state. Generally the consciousness gets swept away, right? You get swept away in the dream. You don't really remember it. You can't really interact with it, or you can't like change things in it. A shaman will go into a trance-like state or into the spirit world, and they will interact directly with spirits. They can actually change what's going on in the spirit world as well. And not only that, but they are actually in the spirit world and in the physical world at the same time. So they can, in real time, talk with the spirits and then relay that information back to people in the physical world.
Okay.
So another thing with shamanic trances too is generally shamans get into these shamanic trances utilizing some type of tools like drumming, chanting, singing. Sometimes they'll use psychoactive like plants or mushrooms to get into those trances too. So that's kind of like the distinction. And the main distinction I would say is that a shaman isn't chosen. A shaman isn't something they call themselves. They're chosen. They're actually like a special person.
Other people would like refer to them as that, but they might not call themselves that.
Yes.
Got it. How would one, might not be an answer, something that you can answer, but maybe it's just something we can like toy with here. How would one, like when you say they're chosen by the spirit world, like how would you know you're chosen by the spirit world?
So in shamanic general, like traditional shamanism, shaman goes through something called the Shamanic Initiation. Okay. Now, this Shamanic initiation in the traditional sense is usually a very violent act against themselves, like a physical or mental attack where they've either had a near-death experience or they've had like a debilitating sickness or something like that. And what the thought is that the spirit world is causing that so that they can overcome it to walk into their mastery and their gifts.
Do you know what this is reminding me of? Is this book that I just read, I think you should read The Secret History of the World.
Yeah.
I really do, because in this he talks about how everything from the beginning of time, before the beginning of time, is, everything is like about consciousness, and different like key players in history represent certain things about consciousness. And there's a lot of talk about this initiating process with, like secret societies or Freemasons or, like different people. And by the way, a lot of like key players in history were a part of these secret societies. And they would go through kind of violent things as well. Like it's almost like a death and then rebirth kind of thing. And and so it's reminding me of that as we're speaking. But it's so interesting how it's like connected but not connected.
In some cases too, a shaman doesn't have a choice about being a shaman. It may be a generational title that's passed down through like father, son, daughter, mother type of thing. So it's something, if they are given, they can either be given these gifts at birth, or they can actually acquire them through a shamanic initiation. And then the community, recognizing that they have received these gifts, basically gives them the title.
Got it. This kind of reminds me of like the Dalai Lama, how he's like chosen. Right? Or am I not? Kind of. I did read a book. I read his biography. I feel like he talked about like he was just chosen as a little boy. Like it wasn't like a choice he made.
No. And that's exactly that. And that can actually happen in traditional shamanic societies. Yeah.
Oh, I love this. This is so
cool. I will say that shamanic practitioners can also have shamanic initiations. for example,
Yeah.
I've had my own shamanic initiation, but in a lot of the cases and a lot of the anecdotes that I've had from other people who have kind of gone through these types of initiations, who are not necessarily from those traditional cultures, they're less violent, they're less physical. It's more of a kind of emotional trauma. They can be very frightening and traumatic to you, but they're not like a physical ailment or a near-death experience. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Like an emotional purging and experience. Yeah. Oh, love it. I have so many thoughts. My wheels are turning. So let's talk about like, how do you work with shamanic principle? Yeah. Practices or principles. Like,
So there's all kinds of different shamanic practices that I kind of learned and played with when I was in that the intuitive shamanic training. So one of the main ones I would say that I utilize the most is Shamanic Journeying. Shamanic Journeying for a shaman would be that trance-like state where they enter basically the spirit world. And in the shamanic tradition, the other world or spirit world is made up of these 3 different levels, actually kind of 4 different levels. There's 3 different levels called the upper world, which is sky, the middle world, which is earth, and then the lower world, which is the underground. And all of them are connected by the world tree. So when I was like working with this concept, I did a visualization of entering into the lower world through a tree. So whenever I go into a journey, I don't use any psychoactive drugs or anything like that. I just basically enter. I'll like ground myself.
Who needs drugs when you got energy? That's how I am. Are you drunk? No, this is just who I am.
So I just enter the journey in a special place, which I call my meadow. And I have 3 different trees in this particular meadow that I can enter the upper or lower world through. Most often, if I'm contacting my guides or dealing with my spirit animals, I'm in the lower world. That's kind of where you find a lot of the healing and how to heal different things in your life or with your clients. The middle world is where like it's the closest to reality. So it's like where you might talk to things like stones or the earth or trees, that kind of thing. You also might find lost souls there too, because it's kind of like the shadow of our own reality, right?
Yeah.
The upper world is where I would talk to things like angels, deities, demigods, that kind of thing, like entities that are kind of higher level. I do have a couple of my guides that go up to the upper world quite a bit. And I don't know if you know about this about me, but my human design is a reflector.
I did know that about you. Yeah, I think you're only like the 3rd person I've ever encountered that's a reflector. Like personally encountered. Yeah.
So a lot for every human design center and chakra in my body, I have a guide. So my upper level ones, like the ones on my crown and my throat and my 3rd eye, those guides are usually in the upper level.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that you're a reflector. That's very uncommon, isn't it? Like 1%.
Yeah, 1% of the population.
It's so low. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. I know for me, like when I learned my human design, I was almost kind of disappointed that I was a generator. Because I'm like, I'm a generator. But the more I've like learned about all the gates and the channels and the type in my incarnation cross, I'm like, okay, there I am. Once I learned I was a 5/1, I'm like, there I am. There I am. That's me.
So when I found out I was a reflector, I was like, no, I'm not. No freaking way. I'm not a reflector. I denied it.
Why? Because it's so like special or uncommon or?
No, it was. No. So I considered myself, I'm an Aries. Okay. So I always thought myself very kind of vivacious and impulsive and, kind of fiery, right? A reflector, their strategy is to wait 28 days.
I know, like the moon
to
cycle,
make a decision.
Yeah, and I thought I had it bad about waiting for the emotional wave because I'm an emotional generator. Like the whole lunar cycle. No,
I'm like, there's no I can wait 28 days to make a decision, right? But as I learned more about it, it made much more sense. And actually, what I found out was that the persona that I had been putting off all of my life was actually other people's energy that I had taken on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I was
Because you're like a
sampling.
mirror, right?
I'm a chameleon. If
Yeah.
I'm in a certain environment, I take on that environment, which is very important for me to be in the right environment so that I'm healthy and that I'm at my best self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little bit like me too when I learned about my open identity center. As I was always like, I only have two open centers, my throat and my identity.
Yes.
And the identity is like, I've noticed in romantic relationships or like really good friendships in the past, I always just like took on their hobbies or became more like them. Randomly, even I'll like take on people's accents sometimes. And I'm like, what is going on? But do you do that ever? I'll be like watching a TV show. Like I remember years ago, I was binge watching The Fall. I don't know if you've ever heard of that show. And I literally later on that day, I'm reading my son a storybook and he's like, why are you talking like that? I was talking with like a thick, like Northern Ireland accent. What is wrong with me? It's my open identity center. I'll just say that. I don't know.
I was really concerned about the open identity center actually when I learned about that. I was like, well, then who am I? Right? So I was really disturbed by it.
How do you interpret that though? Like, I know it's important for us to be with the right company, and also place is very important, which makes a lot of sense for me because I always know when I'm not in the right place, but also like, I don't know if you know about this about me, but like, I feel like the last 10 years, especially because I've lived away from my home province for 10 years now, 10 years in August. That's been so difficult because I've had to like reframe what home means. But I feel like that was a lesson of my open identity of like, home is not anywhere, it's you. And I had to learn that. But I do know that when I'm in certain places, I either feel very aligned or very unaligned. There's like no in between. I know when I'm not with my people.
Oh yeah,
or if I'm not in the right place.
It's like a whole body no, you know what I mean?
A whole body no, this is not for me. But like actually like stepping into my intuitive journey and, you know, working with energy and channeling and all that stuff. And like I channel clients' higher self very often. And one of the things that I ask about is their energetic frequency. And what I've learned through this is like that we all have an energetic frequency and we either are going to magnetize or we're going to repel. And so energy isn't personal. And so I'm like, oh, like a weight fell off my shoulder because I've always been one of those people, like if I felt somebody didn't like me, it would keep me up at night. Like I'd be thinking about it 10 years later. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't meant to impact them. It's just an energy thing. Like it's really nothing personal. I found that really life-changing. Yeah.
So for me, with the Open Identity Center, I was really, really upset about it for a long time until I found my guides. Because my guides became my North Star, right? They would, I knew that if I was unsure in a situation where I had to make an immediate decision, that I could rely on spirit and my guides to provide me the guidance. And when I found that, I was like, oh, like my whole body released. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So tell us about you, because I know that like I listen to your stories when you go on and you talk about your different spirit guides. And I'd love to know, like, how did you become acquainted with them? Like, what was that process like? Is that a long loaded story?
It's a long loaded story. So my guides, they it was kind of like a petal, like a flower opening. My spiritual journey was very like, kind of like petal by petal, I opened up. So my first guide that I found was actually my identity center. She is my heart center. And her name is Iris. And she is like my solace. She is the guide that I would contact most often for guidance. She is like a warm motherly figure. She like feeds me cookies when I go visit her in her cottage. You know what I mean? And I found her through doing a visualization, doing a shamanic journey. And most of my guides, that is how I met them. I met them through shamanic journeys. Sometimes I had blockages. One of my guides, I actually had a shamanic initiation for. So my root guide And the root guide is a hard one because I've had a lot of turmoil around the root guide. My first root guide was an indigenous man. He told me his name was Tetsue. And my first meeting with him was reliving his death, his traumatic murder by colonial soldiers. And I actually experienced it through his eyes. And that was how I met him. For the longest time, I refused to go into this one place in my shamanic journeys in my other world. That was like this deep dungeon with a bunch of it was a bunch of doors in this deep, long hallway. And I was really afraid, and I had this really big trepidation about going there. And it was because that's where I was supposed to meet my root guide, and I would have to go through this initiation. So I ended up actually asking my mentor Dee to actually come with me on the journey so that she could support me if I needed it. And she kind of asked me specific questions and kind of gave me a little guidance while I was there and what I was seeing. And it turned out fine. It was traumatic in the sense that I saw someone being killed, and there was also this aspect of his daughter too, about him leaving his daughter behind. Which, oh my God, anything about children, it just strikes my heart, right? But I also got the sense of his importance in his community and the deep knowing that he had and could provide to me. So it was also comforting in a way to meet him. The interesting part is that he actually ended up leaving me, which was another shamanic initiation later on in my spiritual journey. And I ended up with a new root guide later on.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. So do you think that we all, because I do connect to spirit guides. It's funny because for years and years and years, I believed in spirit guides, and even when I was doing, intuitive work for other people, I'd bring through their spirit guides. I never intentionally ask for them to come through, say in a psychic reading, unless the client asks me to, but sometimes they will show up in their physical form. And I always know that means that the client I'm sitting with actually has probably asked for that information or wants the visual, wants the name, sorry, so that they can have that visual and that name to initiate contact. But I never did that for myself. And then I recorded an episode about spirit guides on the other podcast that I co-host with Erin. It's called Soul Rising. And we kind of did this. I left the session kind of saying, okay, I'm going to do my homework and I'll report back next week. I'm going to initiate contact with my own spirit guides. And so I did. I got names, and there's 3, but 2 specifically come forward for me all the time. And then I'm looking at the painting actually a week later or something. I saw this painting on Facebook Marketplace, and it just kind of looked like abstract art. I couldn't really make it out, but I just really liked it because it had a lot of shades of purple, and it was really, really, really big. And so I went and got it. And then when I hung it on the wall, I'm like, oh my God, there's literally, it looks like there's 3 shapes, like human bodies. It looks like you're seeing the back of 3 people, and their heads are kind of turning back to look at you. And I'm like, I knew instantly that this was a representation or something about my guides, right? So I have it on the wall behind here. But do you think that we all have, you have one for every center? Do you think that's something that just a reflector might have, or?
So that's what Dee thinks. Dee thinks that it's something that's kind of particular to me.
Okay.
My guides too, most of my guides are actually past lives.
Okay.
And these past lives were reflectors in those past lives. So it's funny, when I first kind of interacted with Dee, I came on as a guest on a call for her to help some of her healers that were in training do some kind of healing work, right? And one of the practices that we did was actually going through a portal. So it's this practice of going through a portal rather than doing a shamanic journey. And when I was in that portal, we were talking about guides and meeting guides or meeting entities. And the visualization I got was that my guides went into infinity because all of my guides are a past life. So it was like me, but gone to infinity. basically.
Yeah.
And when I've talked to my guides about that, they've told me that eventually I will become a spirit guide for another one of my past lives. Yeah. So
like for you in another life.
exactly.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I think it's something very specific to reflectors because they know what it means to be a reflector, and they can guide me through the difficulties of being a reflector. Now, not all of my guides are my past lives, but most of them are.
I was just reflecting on, like the two main that I talked about that I communicate with quite regularly and who I know by name and visual are male and female. Matthew and Lila are the names that I was given. And actually, now that I'm sitting here and I'm reflecting on kind of like the teachings and the guidance that they each give me is both very different. And I was, as you were speaking, I was thinking about my only two open centers are my throat and my identity. And I'm seeing how it feels like they're each helping with one of those, like based on what they're bringing through. So I'm like, having aha moments over here.
Yeah. So it's funny too. Yeah. So when I started talking about having one for each of my human design centers, as well as my chakras, there's another woman in my group who actually has found that she has a guide for each of her chakra centers.
I'm gonna have to go deeper into this. Yeah. See who else is around me for sure.
So I have 9 guides total because I have 9 open centers, basically. And they're there to provide guidance to that particular center. So for example, my throat chakra, I have a dragon. So
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, just dragon energy in the throat and expression. And I can't wait for you to listen to the episode that I recorded earlier today about dragon energy because just experience. I think you're going to see like commonalities between what we're talking about now.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And it's funny really too, cool. My throat center guide, the way he interacts with me is actually through conversations. He will talk to me in full sentences. Yeah. While my other guides, there's two specific guides that I interact with daily who actually manifest physical things in my body. So my guide Iris, who is my heart center, she actually will answer yes and no questions by like a nod and like a kind of movement in my body. And my other sacral center guide, Paulo, he actually will like wink one eye for yes or no, depending on what it is. So each guide has their kind of like these little like little things that kind of are distinctive to the center too. Yeah.
I love that your guides represent past lives. It's funny because I did a session with someone maybe about a month ago, and we actually did a past life reading. Cool. And she asked me that question actually. I don't remember the question, but something to do with like, can my past lives be spirit guides? And I was like, I've never had a past life come forward and say yes, but like when I sat with it, I was like, I feel yes. I feel yes, they can. So it's really cool that you're bringing it up.
So I get into these like logical loops in my mind about it too. And I'm like, well, if I'm me and my energy is me that has come from source back into this body, then how can this external past life also be? But
yes,
but I think that they are all individual consciousnesses that have existed in my energy, but are also kind of separate from me. So in a lot of ways, when I interact with my guides, it's an external thing coming into me. It's not an intuitive knowing inside, which is something actually that I'm starting to work on. I'm actually starting to go into the experiencing intuition rather than interacting with intuition. I'm going to start kind of seeking those types of things because I really want to embody intuition rather than logically talking to my intuition.
Just know about it. Actually live it. Be it.
Exactly.
Be it. Yeah. I definitely feel you're ready for that. I wrote down something earlier when you were talking about something, and I wrote down manipulating and mastering energy. I forget what you were talking about at this time, but I feel like my guides have kind of brought forward that's kind of what we're all here to be doing. That's what we're learning, is how to manipulate and master and work with energy. You would agree with that?
Oh, I totally do. Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
I
think,
honestly think the sky is the limit if you are tapping into your authentic selves and really listening to your intuition.
yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think
Yeah.
that anybody who is in like a spiritual traditional type of, or like doing a spiritual journey is manipulating energy, because
Yeah.
everything that we deal with is energy. Our emotions are energy. You know what I mean? Our thoughts are energy. Anything
Yeah.
that's running through our body is energy. So when you sit
Hmm.
with your emotions, provide them gratitude and release them, you are manipulating that energy,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Love it. So I would love to, let's talk a little bit. Let's end with kind of based on what we've discussed and all the things, the conversation we've had. It's been, I love this
All over the
conversation actually.
place.
It's, yeah, yeah, but I think I think that's purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you listen back, sometimes I record and I think I'm all over the place, but then if I listen back, I'm like, okay, I can see the streams of consciousness and how it connects. So I think it's purposeful. It's us getting in our head about it. Um, but yeah, let's kind of talk about hash out in this moment. So we've talked about shamanic practices and principles, and which, like, you have an understanding of like psychic work, intuitive work, just it's kind of the same, I
Mm-hmm.
feel, and then mediumship, and you have
Mm-hmm.
an understanding of what mediumship is, and people that are listening do. So like, let's kind of like compare and contrast here.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so like you were saying with like shamanism, you can, and you can kind of converse, like you were saying something like the shaman could converse with the spirit like in real time, ask them a question, bring it back to somebody here in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can do that in psychic readings and mediumship, right? Like
Yeah.
communicating with a different spirit or
Mm-hmm.
energy, but able to have that back and forth conversations. So I think
Yes.
that's a
A definite.
commonality.
Yeah.
um,
So I'm
feel free to
curious.
jump into.
I'm curious.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
one of the aspects of shamanism is that shamans can actually help like past individuals move on to the afterlife. Is that something that
Hmm.
that you've seen in your mediumship as well?
I haven't personally worked with that. And it might be, I honestly feel like everything we do with energy is based on intention.
Mm-hmm.
And my ideas around spirits and, earthbound spirits versus, spirits that have gone to the light, so to speak, that has changed based on my work. Um, in the beginning, I will preface to say that I always work with individuals that have crossed over.
Okay.
And that just
Okay.
has happened. It's not really been an intention. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the way it's happened. And so I used to kind of, I don't know. I used to think to myself, and I might say to another person, well, I don't believe in anything lower. I don't believe in any kind of like lower energy beings. I think it's all just,
Hmm.
that's just us creating it. And that was really my point of view. And the more work that I do, and the more, even though I'm not experiencing those lower entities or like earthbound spirits, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
my awareness of the possibility of everything
Mm-hmm.
has is expanded. So I no longer feel confident in saying that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Just that based on my intention, I don't connect
With
to
them.
it.
Okay.
Right. So for me, I haven't worked with someone who needs help crossing over.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
that is something that Dee in particular has actually helped with. Like
That's her
one
thing.
of well, not necessarily anymore, but
Not just, yeah.
she has done that before. And she's actually done end of life stuff too, end of life
Mm-hmm.
healings that eases the
Mm-hmm.
transition between a sick person
Spirits.
into the
Yeah.
afterlife. And
Yeah.
actually, in some of our healing sessions as a group, we have actually encountered entities, may not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
be spirits, it could be an entity, um,
Right.
who have been stuck somewhere and needed to get pushed
Needed
through
help
to the next. Yeah,
out. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess long-winded answer is I haven't personally worked with them, but that doesn't mean that it
Hmm.
doesn't exist for sure. Um,
So
yeah.
I have another question.
Okay.
So when you are entering like that kind of space where you're going to interact with a spirit, or the spirit world, do you have the same kind of like visualization? Like, do you do some type of visualization to get there, like I would with through my world tree or anything like that, or you just enter?
You just enter.
You just enter.
It's I know, and some people are like, okay, really? Like, I want more than that. I'm like, I'm sorry. So I used to actually be insecure about this because like I haven't ever taken any like mentorship when it comes to my psychic or mediumship abilities. I literally just feel like one day the door opened and they were like, it's time, go. You know my story. It came after my dad passed, but really things were happening before. I can see things were happening before, but that was the like no turning back now kind of moment.
That was your
That was my initiation. And it's interesting as well because my father has come through in every reading I've had for myself with another reader, regardless of the type of reading.
Oh, yeah.
My father comes through in a guide like manner, and is stepping in to help me with this part of my life, which I always laugh at because he was a huge skeptic in life, and he would have thought I was absolutely like off my rocker. So I think it's amazing that he's now stepping in to help me with it. But no, I think he helps me. I honestly think he helps me with it. I feel like based on the past life, you know, meditations and things that I've done, I've had a reading with somebody else, past life. I feel like I have done this many times in past lives. So I don't want to say it comes easy or naturally because there's still work and effort associated with it, but I just kind of get there. Yeah. It's like I literally, so this is what happens. Say that you're my client. I would come down the stairs probably 5 minutes before our session. I turn on the light, make sure the mic is good, make sure I have a fresh piece of paper in front of me, cup of water, and I would simply take some deep breaths for maybe a minute or so, and I would talk either out loud or in my head and set my intentions for the reading. Okay. So, and I do this regardless of what type of reading it is. So if I was connecting for you, for somebody like a loved one in spirit, I would say, you know, I'm here to connect to Krystle's loved one in spirit. Anyone that is, you know, around, please come through, and I'll give them kind of direction. So I'll say, please talk slowly, please, you know, utilize my clairvoyance, my clairsentience, my clairaudience. Please bring through things that are specific and evidential. I also, as an extra, also set my intention to connect to something that just happened or has happened since they've been passed. Okay. So when those things come through, it's always like, oh my God, I just did that yesterday, you know, like, and that's something that I set my intention for, because then it shows that they like really are with you, not just at Christmas and your birthday, but like anytime you think of them, spirits have thought away. So that's my process. And, you know, I have a combo session where I do like, it's half intuitive guidance, which is what I call psychic reading, and half mediumship. And so I set my intention in the beginning to connect to my client's energy for that. And then while they're still here on the screen, I go, okay, just a moment. I'm going to switch gears. I'm just going to set my intention to disconnect from you and to connect to your loved ones. And it just kind of happens just like that. Yeah.
So it's funny. So we also, like, as a group, we actually do that too. Like whenever we're in healing sessions, Dee will just be like, okay, so we've been talking about something specific that's been going on in our life. And then she'll be like, okay, we're going to set the intention to see what's here for this particular thing. And that's kind of how I do a lot of my stuff too. I think
that's what it is. Yeah. It's your intention and it's your trust in it. And with trust comes confidence, right? Because you keep doing it. So I just sit and I don't get nervous, and I know I have such a trust in the spirit world that I know that they're going to show up. Yes. Like I don't worry about it. I know they're going to come. And I think it can be that simple. It can. And it's funny because I had an Akashic Records reading maybe sometime in the spring. And it was actually a blend. Do you know who Emily and Her Stars is? Do you follow her on IG?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Yeah. So she, I booked an Akashic astrology reading.
Oh, wow.
Because she's an astrologer as well.
Yeah.
And so, so she like had my chart, had it up on the screen. And she's like, okay, I'm going to focus on a couple aspects of your chart, and I'm going to open the records and connect to lifetimes in which you had these same specific aspects. And so the ones that she opened up had the same north and south node as I have in this lifetime. And also I asked to connect to my moon, because I have a moon in Libra in the second house.
Okay.
And moon and Pluto are together, which is sometimes a little combustible. So they're in there together. So I wanted to know, like, what's that teaching me too, right? Like, what's this all about? And so she brought through 2 specific lifetimes. And the second one was Medicine Man from Africa. I think it was like Northern Africa. And she was bringing up all this really cool stuff and stuff about the bone and bone medicine. And he was encouraging me to get into that and stuff about like the marrow. Anyways, it's just like, I still need to revisit that. And like when I have time and go down the rabbit hole of all that, but he brought through, it's funny because he brought through that in this lifetime, I'm encouraged to write a book. So if you saw my stories today, I talked about that, right?
Yeah.
So he said she is encouraged to be with this north and south node. She's encouraged to write a book. And Emily went back and she said, okay, like, what should she write the book about? And he said, making spiritual practices simple. She can make them simple. And that's what her people need. And so, amazing. And like some ancestral kind of stuff. So I need to explore the bone medicine piece. But the wild thing is when she said that to me, my face was like this. So after she closed the record, she's like, what was your face? Why was it doing that? And I said, because right in front of me on my monitor from Colette Baron Reed deck, there's a card called the Bone Collector. And it was the card that I pulled that day, and it was sitting on my monitor. And I'm like, what the hell?
It's like one of those moments, right?
Yeah, it was one of those moments. I'm like, okay. So yeah, I found that really cool. So
I was going to say, do you find that you provide healing to your clients whenever you're doing these types of readings?
That's what I hear. I do. I tap in. Something that I've always set my intention with is, people often ask me, like, were you ever afraid of the spirit world? Never. Lovely folks. I love the spirit world. Never be afraid of them. I was afraid of the people that I would serve, or the people that would find me, because I am a people pleaser in recovery. I overgive, and I'm working on, any insecurities or sense of worthiness around around like being liked or being of service, and making sure I'm doing a good job, because I have very high expectations of myself.
Yes.
And so it's this makes sense why I'm on this journey, because you literally have to let go and just let it happen.
I know, it's the surrendering, right?
It's the surrendering. You have to do it. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. Ask me the question again. Tell me you have ADHD without telling me you have ADHD. Like, what were we talking about? That's a spiritual person thing too. Do you notice when I'm with a lot of other people, they're like, wait a second, because you're like
all over the place.
Taking it all in.
I'm actually pretty sure I have ADHD as well. Yeah. So I think it's a commonality for sure.
I think so too. Sorry, ask me that question one more time.
So basically, do you feel like you provide healing whenever you do these? Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I do. So the people that I work with, like, I have very close-knit connection to all of them.
Yeah.
It feels like we just become friends. Like, I will tell you, like, probably 80% of my client base over the last 5 years, and we're talking about thousands of people at this point, are keeping in touch, sending me emails, and that's what I want, though, because I want that connection and I want it. I don't want anybody to feel like I'm just here providing a service and like I'm not invested in them, because I'm fully invested in them in every sense of the word. So I do feel that I provide healing. That's what I hear. And I know that it's healing me as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's like my intention, especially with like the intuitive guidance, which other people might call a psychic reading, but I purposely call it intuitive guidance. And that's because, I can bring through predictions about what's going to happen in 5 years, but I also believe that like the future is fluid. And so if something comes in about the future, I will say it's a high probability. And And so I think that it can do someone a disservice to say this is going to happen in 5 years and that's all you give them, because then they expect it, but maybe they don't put any energy or effort or work or anything into that, towards that thing, and then maybe it won't happen. So for me, it's all about like the guidance and like, how can I empower you to be your best self? How can I help put you on that path?
How can
So
you work towards your goals, right?
Yeah, it's much more like, I think I said that on my website in a video I recorded. Like, if you're looking for that like fortune teller in the tent, I'm not the gal for you, because this is way deeper than that. And this is about like, not necessarily just like what's going to happen in 5 years, but like, why hasn't that happened yet? What are some potential challenges? Like, I want you to have that, but it's not just going to drop out of thin air.
No,
probably not.
No, exactly.
So
you have to
I
work
think
towards
so.
It. You have to.
Absolutely.
You have to put in energy to get energy, right? So the only way that you will get what you want is by putting that energy back out into the universe. So,
I want to end with a laugh.
Oh.
I want to end with a laugh. I'll tell you why. Where did I write this today? I don't know where I wrote it, but I'm going to bring it up on my phone, because today's daily tarot, you know how I do that every day.
Yes. Yeah.
Was the 7 of Pentacles, reversed. And so what I wrote says the 7 of Pentacles comes in a reverse position today and brings in the guidance that you will get out of a project, goal, and or investment what you put into it. It also means you get out of life what you put into it, right? Like, that's the message for today as we speak. So I think that's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I just said, I hear, stop worrying about this, and instead shift your focus towards how you can best align with this opportunity that you want. Yeah, everything you put out will come back to you if you believe in it.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it.
Believe and surrender. Believe and surrender into it.
You have to let go.
You do.
You have to let go. I know. Hardest thing ever for most of us in this world, in this society.
As a recovering control freak, yeah, totally.
I know. Like, do you know like how offended I was that when I learned, do you know what the Enneagram is?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm an Enneagram 2 wing 3.
Okay.
And the person that told me this was also an Enneagram 2. And she's like, so, tough love. You're probably going to hate me for this, but your people pleasing is a form of manipulation. And I'm like, excuse me? Pardon, I'm a nice friggin' person. And she's like, it's a form of manipulation because you're trying to control the outcome of something.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I have to work on myself. But it's true, you know? Yeah. Sometimes the enabling and the Mr. Nice Guy all the time there's a difference between, there's a difference between being nice and like being a doormat or. Yes. Yeah. Do you know what my main spirit guide tells me all the time? And I actually have it on my wall in a Post-it note. All the time. My 2 things he says to me. One is just do it scared. Just do the effing thing, right? Like he is very no nonsense, doesn't sugarcoat anything to me. Do the thing. So I'm like, okay. And another one is you can be kind and take no shit. So stop taking shit. You can be kind. Sometimes it's kind to not take shit. Exactly. Like sometimes it's mean to constantly take crap from you, right? Yeah, yes. You're not serving. Something that like, you know, sometimes where you can hear something a million times, but then somebody says it a certain way and you're like, oh, it hit. Well, that happened with me from my main spirit guide, Matthew. He said to me, when you feel, when somebody asks you something, and in your gut, like, you know what a no and a yes feels like inside. Exactly. Everybody does. Yeah. And you feel the no, but because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or, you know, you don't want to piss anybody off, or you don't want to look like the bad guy, you say yes. Yes. And he said to me, that is actually the opposite of what you should do. You need to trust this feeling that's coming in, because when you say yes, when you mean no, that other person was supposed to hear no. Yeah. They were supposed to hear no, and you said yes, so you didn't do them any favors, and you certainly didn't do yourself any favors.
No, they're not learning from that experience.
Right? Yeah. Because maybe they were supposed to do it, or maybe they were supposed to ask somebody else and figure it out somehow. But if it feels like a no to you, it's a no to everybody.
Yeah, you've disrupted their path, really, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, that just changed my whole life. So now I have no problem saying no. I really don't. It gets easier every single time you do it. Yeah. No, I don't think I'll do that. Thank you though. Like, yeah. So thank you for agreeing. You can still be kind. Of course. Thank you so much for the opportunity. But I don't think I have time for that right now. Exactly. That is so much nicer than showing up like in a bad mood and with kind of bad vibes. Energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So on that note, thank you for hopefully hearing a yes and saying yes. And thanks for sharing all your wisdom nuggets and, all your teachings about shamanism. I thought that was really cool and interesting. I learned some stuff. I had some aha moments.
Oh, that's good. That's what I like to hear. I like to know that my energy is also impacting other people in positive ways, right?
Yeah, and it's funny, like I mentioned earlier when I first connected to you, that I just feel like, when I'm with your energy, and that's how I feel right now. This whole episode has been like very loud. I'm probably going to have to turn down the volume on my, I think that's good. I don't know if you feel that too, but I definitely feel like.
This felt very, very natural. It felt very natural, and it felt good. It had a really good vibe for sure. Yeah.
Good. And I know that will translate to the audience. So enjoy, everyone. You're welcome.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed it. Krystle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So much. Take care, guys.
Thank you for joining me for another episode here of the Intuitive Rising podcast. If you would like to continue the chats and join the community, please join us over on Facebook and search for the Intuitive Rising community. All are welcome. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider giving it a 5-star rating. If you'd like to connect with me directly, please visit my website at theintuitiverising.com.